There is a current that runs through your destiny, a subtle, unstoppable current that knows the contours of your purpose and will not be held back. When someone in your family attempts to sabotage, belittle, or sabotage the path laid out for you, the universe does not sit idly by. It answers, not always with thunder or spectacle, but with precise, inevitable adjustments that restore balance and honor the design that brought you here. If you are a chosen one, understand that your life is shielded by forces both seen and unseen. Attempts to interfere seldom end the way the interloper imagines. If this message reached you at a moment when you needed confirmation, take it as a sign. Please subscribe to the channel so we can continue sending bold, clarifying messages for those walking the path of elevation. And if this message arrived at the very right time, if it landed in your lap when you were searching for proof, type 11 in the comments below. Do that as a declaration. You recognize the timing, you accept the protection, and you open yourself to divine blessings. Now, breathe deep, read on. These are the 9 things that happen to family members who dare to mess with a chosen one. 1. They begin to lose influence, slowly but surely. When a family member persistently works against your growth, their influence on your life, and on others around you starts to erode. Influence is a delicate currency, earned by consistent action, trustworthiness, and the ability to hold space for others. And when someone spends that currency trying to pull another person down, the slow burn of consequence begins. At first the change is almost imperceptible, a missed invitation here, a polite distance there, a hesitation before sharing private thoughts. People who once listened begin to notice patterns, the same petty comments, the recurrent bitterness and the draining energy of small-mindedness, and subconsciously they start to shift where they place their attention. Social proof is a powerful force. When others stop amplifying a person's voice, that voice loses its sheen. Over time, the erosion accelerates in quiet, practical ways. Confidences are withheld, fewer collaborations happen, and the person finds themselves increasingly left out of moments they once took for granted. The loss of influence is rarely dramatic or theatrical. It is a steady accounting, a silent forfeiture of the bank of goodwill they once relied on. For you, this process is not about revenge or schadenfreude, it's restoration, a reallocation of energy toward those who build rather than break. For them, the gradual withdrawal is often the first true feedback they receive. Their tactics cost them connection. The awareness that people no longer turn naturally toward them can become a powerful mirror, if they are willing to look. If they ignore it, the slow leak continues. Invitations fade, leadership roles evaporate, and their counsel carries less weight. Influence returns only when actions align consistently with integrity again, and even then it takes time to rebuild what was lost. 2. Their true colors get exposed. Family dynamics are complex systems where loyalties, histories, and unspoken rules keep many truths hidden beneath the surface. When someone targets a chosen one, the very intensity of that opposition often creates small fissures through which long-concealed tendencies filter out. Words that once seemed polished begin to show the rough edges of motive. Justifications that had been persuasive now sound hollow in the light of repeated behavior. Exposure rarely arrives as a single dramatic unmasking. More often it is a pattern of small revelations. An offhand comment that betrays an agenda, a privately shared rumor that slips back to its originator, or an ally's slowly cooling enthusiasm. These quiet unravelings are no less powerful for their size. Gossip, truth, and consequence have a way of circling back, and as they do, they illuminate inconsistencies between what was said and what was actually done. People who had once been comfortable taking a person's side begin to question why they are being asked to ignore harm. Old friends who had assumed loyalty find themselves re-evaluating motives. Exposure provides the person facing scrutiny with something crucial, feedback they can no longer escape. It creates the possibility of accountability, the chance to confront choices honestly, and, if genuinely received, to change. For the community, these revelations recalibrate trust. For the targeted chosen one, they reduce the potency of covert attacks by making motives transparent. In the best-case scenario, exposure acts as mercy. It pulls a person out from behind the protective mask of secrecy and forces a reckoning. In other cases, the exposure is the beginning of a social realignment, where relationships are restructured around authenticity rather than appearances. 3. They experience inner restlessness and discontent. When someone is aligned with purpose and clarity, that alignment functions like an energetic center, a magnet for integrity, and a reflector of incongruence. Those who persistently sow discord around a chosen one often encounter a surprising internal friction. The behaviors they rely on to control or belittle others start to register inwardly as dissonance. This manifests as a creeping unrest that can show up in many practical ways: restless sleep, a sudden inability to concentrate, heightened irritability, impulsive decision-making, or an inexplicable dissatisfaction with things that previously brought comfort. Money, possessions, and temporary distractions may temporarily mask the discomfort, but they rarely resolve it. The sensation is less mystical punishment and more the natural consequence of acting contrary to one's deeper values. Conscience and habit collide, producing an anxious pressure that insists on attention. This internal unrest can be profoundly disorienting. People who once felt confident in their manipulations may find themselves second-guessing motives, replaying interactions late at night, or feeling a vague but persistent sense that something is wrong. For many, this discomfort becomes a catalyst. It forces an inward examination that had been avoided, bringing buried insecurities, shame, or fear into sharper focus. The process can be painful because it requires humility and the admission that one's actions have consequences beyond immediate gains. Yet, when met honestly, this restlessness can be the first step towards self-awareness and healing. The person who once fought another's rising light may eventually choose to turn inward, not out of mystical retribution but because the mounting dissonance becomes unbearable until addressed. In this sense, inner unrest functions as an internal alarm, a psychological and spiritual nudging toward alignment rather than destruction. 4. Life begins to redirect their plans. The universe, or simply the architecture of cause and effect in life, is often unhurried but precise in how it realigns energies and opportunities. People who invest time and intention in undermining another's path frequently begin to notice that plans which once unfolded smoothly now meet resistance. Momentum that had sustained them falters. This redirection doesn't always resemble dramatic catastrophe. More commonly, it shows up as a steady series of small obstacles, meetings that are postponed, proposals that don't get traction, introductions that never materialize, or timing that inexplicably misses the mark. The cumulative effect is a redirecting of life's current toward new channels that more closely reflect the internal work that must now be done. Where there was once complacency and easy access, there can suddenly be friction and delay. This realignment is not necessarily punitive. In a compassionate reading, it is corrective. Obstacles push the individual to reevaluate priorities, to notice where ego or unresolved wounds drove their choices, and to cultivate humility. The pain of stalled plans often strips away illusions of entitlement and forces a confrontation with the parts of life left unattended. Some find this redirection deeply uncomfortable. It feels like loss or failure. Others, when they reach the other side, describe it as a long overdue course correction that ultimately opens healthier pathways. Whether the result is transformation or prolonged frustration depends on response. Those who resist the lesson may double down on old patterns and suffer continued setbacks, while those who listen and adjust can discover more sustainable, grounded ways forward. In either case, life's redirecting hand serves to rebalance intentions and outcomes, nudging the person toward a version of success that requires integrated character rather than short-term gain, achieved at another's expense. 5. They become the subject of their own regrets. Regret is a solitary currency that compounds in silence. When family members betray trust or seek to diminish someone they once loved, the relational debts accrued don't evaporate. Instead, they linger in memory, showing up later as quiet pressure on the heart. The person who engaged in harm may find themselves replaying moments, the cutting remark, the intentional exclusion, the choice to side with spite over support, and slowly recognizing the cost of those choices. This recollection often arrives with a sting, the knowledge that safe spaces, intimate confidences, and the simple ease of shared family life have been compromised. Regret manifests not only as sorrow but as practical consequence. Invitations that once seemed automatic no longer arrive. Apologies that might have repaired bridges are delayed or never fully formed. And the trust that supported everyday vulnerability has weakened. For some, this regret is fruitful. It becomes the seed of repentance and authentic change. They reach out, make amends, and begin the arduous work of rebuilding trust through consistent, humble action. For others, regret ossifies into bitterness, a hardening that isolates them further and prevents restorative action. Either outcome underscores a painful truth. Hurting those closest to us often leads to a unique, gnawing loneliness, because those are the relationships we most count on for forgiveness and comeback. The more public or sustained the betrayal, the deeper the potential regret, and the more work required to remedy it. Ultimately, regret serves as both punishment and teacher. It forces the person to reckon with who they were, and to choose whether they will become someone different. If they choose growth, regret can catalyze transformation. If they do not, it will remain as an ever-present ledger of moments that might have been otherwise. 6. Karmic mirrors start to appear, small but relentless. The principle that energy returns in kind, sometimes named karmic law, often appears not as sudden cosmic revenge, but as a steady pattern of mirrored consequences that accumulate over time. When someone projects harm onto a chosen one, the echoes of that behavior begin to reverberate through other areas of their life. This isn't always dramatic or immediate. Instead, it often shows up in subtle but telling ways. An important relationship strained by suspicion, an unexpected breakdown in communications, a trust misread in a professional setting, or small losses that appear at inconvenient moments. These mirrored events function like private lesson plans, each one reflecting some aspect of the original action back to the actor so they can see its wider impact. Over time, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. A single petty act might lead to a chain of small disappointments. Repeated choices to harm compound into a broader reputation problem that affects opportunities and alliances. For the chosen one, these karmic mirrors offer confirmation that a larger balance is being restored, that the field around them is reorienting toward equilibrium. For the family member, the mirrors can be disorienting, especially if they had assumed their actions were inconsequential. They may experience an increasing sense of friction and frustration, without readily connecting it to their earlier behavior. The lesson embedded in these reflections is straightforward. Energy sown is energy reaped. Recognition of this pattern can either prompt humility and course correction, or provoke denial and blame shifting. In the humane outcome, the mirrors are invitations to learn compassion, to make amends, and to choose differently going forward. 7. They trigger their own unhealed wounds, amplified. When someone attacks or undermines a chosen one, the aggression rarely emerges from a neutral place. More often it is tangled with old pain, unresolved shame, and unprocessed fear. The act of targeting another becomes a lightning rod that draws out those buried injuries and magnifies them. What might have been a small insecurity, when projected outward repeatedly, becomes a gaping wound that shapes behavior more and more dramatically. The person's defensiveness hardens, reactions intensify, and their internal narrative becomes dominated by stories of scarcity, victimhood, or grievance. This amplification creates a tragic feedback loop. The more they lash out to protect their perceived advantage, the more their original wound deepens, which in turn fuels further destructive behavior. The process is painful to watch because it reveals the underlying humanity behind the harm, adolescence of the soul acting from places of fear rather than malice alone. Yet there is a redemptive possibility here. When these unhealed wounds come into view, they offer a clear target for genuine healing if the person is willing to accept responsibility and pursue it. Therapy, mentorship, spiritual practice, or honest community, accountability can transform the cycle into a pathway of repair. If the person refuses to face their wounds, the amplification continues, relationships fracture, emotional reactivity grows, and opportunities for reconciliation shrink. In the best-case scenario, the crisis produced by acting out becomes the very impetus for addressing long-avoided pain, leading to a deeper maturity that could never have arisen without the painful mirror of their own behavior. 8. They lose favor in the eyes of the divine and of community leaders. Favor, whether described as divine goodwill, spiritual support, or the endorsement of community leaders, tends to gravitate toward integrity, humility, and service. When family members act in ways that actively undermine a chosen one's destiny, those who steward the spiritual and civic health of a community often notice and respond. This loss of favor is typically quiet rather than theatrical. Leaders who once offered guidance become less available, mentors withdraw invitations to deepen relationships, and spiritual elders create protective boundaries to safeguard the collective. This isn't about moralizing or public shaming. It's about the practical responsibility of those in positions of care to preserve the well-being of the group. Favor functions as both privilege and responsibility, and when someone uses their influence to harm rather than uplift, the community's stewards will often step back to prevent further harm. The result is a soft but consequential distancing that signals a lack of endorsement. This can be disorienting for the person who misstepped, because they may not immediately grasp why doors once open are now closed. For the chosen one, the disengagement of leaders is a protective measure that allows space for restoration and reorientation. For the offender, it becomes a potent form of feedback. Character matters, and community guardianship entails consequences for a pattern of destructive behavior. Loss of favor is also an opportunity for learning. It invites the person to reflect on the dissonance between their stated values and lived actions. If they respond with accountability and genuine change, favor can be restored over time. If they do not, the distance can become permanent, reshaping their role within both spiritual and civic circles. 9. Divine protection around you strengthens, and their power to harm diminishes. When a chosen one stands firm in integrity and purpose, the field of support around them often consolidates, not necessarily in dramatic miracles, but in consistent, practical ways that protect and enable growth. Doors that once let in negative influences begin to close. Intuitive warnings, helpful connections, and supportive people show up at critical moments, and opportunities align to help restore balance after disruption. This strengthening is part spiritual and part pragmatic. As a person embodies truth, others who resonate with that frequency naturally move closer to assist, while those who seek to harm find their leverage slipping away. The diminishment of the antagonist's power is rarely absolute overnight. It unfolds as a series of small realignments. Relationships that no longer tolerate abuse, institutions that refuse to be complicit, and legal or social supports that make harmful tactics less effective. Practical help arrives in forms both large and small. A timely conversation with a family elder who clarifies misunderstandings, a legal advisor who protects rights, a friend who provides sanctuary, or a chance encounter that redirects a threatened opportunity. As these supports accumulate, the ability of the person who attempted harm to influence outcomes declines. This is not about pride or assuming invulnerability, rather it is about the natural insulation that comes with living in alignment. Destiny, when tended faithfully, develops a kind of built-in stewardship. People and circumstances conspire to keep the path clear. For the chosen one, this is confirmation that standing in truth is not loneliness but a magnet for necessary help. For the would-be saboteur, their tools fail to produce the result they sought, and their attempts at control increasingly look ineffective. The end result is a reordering that favors integrity, safety, and the unfolding of purpose. To the chosen one, take these signs not as an excuse to gloat or to cultivate resentment, but as tools for discernment. Protect your peace. Create boundaries. Walk away from those who persist in trying to dim your light. And remember, transformation is the objective, not punishment. Where possible, offer room for repentance and restoration, but do so only when safety and integrity are assured. To the family member reading this who recognizes themselves, know that all is not lost. The changes you're experiencing are invitations to change course. Humble yourself, seek forgiveness, and repair what you can. Destiny is kinder when we align with it rather than resist it. This is the Chosen Seer channel. If this message landed when you needed it most, again, take a moment and type 1111 in the comments below to claim the divine timing and blessings. Subscribe for more powerful messages for those on the path of elevation. Share this with anyone who needs to see it. Sometimes a single paragraph is all it takes to save a life from wandering. Thank you for watching.